Well, hello there. Welcome back to the Pacific War channel, where we cover the entire history of the Asia-Pacific War of 1937 to 1945, and all the major events that led up to it. Today, we are slashing into the Boshin War of 1868 to 1869. Now, if you want the full history of how we got here, check out my previous episode on the Meiji Restoration for more context. But here's a quick summary. Before that, if you have not done so already, please smack that like button. Please smack also the subscribe button. It would mean a lot to this channel, as it does pay for little treats for my friend here. Now, Japan was forcefully opened in 1853, after 214 years of being isolated from the rest of the world, by our American friend, Commodore Matthew C. Perry.
Hey, you gonna open up the country or what?
In the face of possible war and colonization by Western nations, the Tokugawa Shogunate and its allies signed the humiliating unequal treaties such as the Amity and Commerce Treaty. This resulted in two factions emerging amongst the Isshin Shishi, nobles of Japan. The first was a pro-Tokugawa Shogunate faction, who saw signing the treaties and working with Western nations as beneficial and necessary for survival. This faction consisted of the Tokugawa Shogun, his forces, and northern hands that supported the regime. The second was the sonnō backing faction, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, which sought to get rid of the shogun and the shogunate system, put the emperor back in control like the days of old, and expel the western barbarians. This faction consisted mostly of southern hands such as Satsuma, Chōshū, and Tosa. Emperor Komei agreed with the anti-shogunate faction and broke centuries of imperial tradition by taking an active political stance, protesting the signing of the unequal treaties and making a decree to dissolve the Tokugawa house. Now, during all of this political strife, Western nations also began to get involved in forming treaties with who they thought would be the next government of Japan and sold arms to different regions of Japan. The Tokugawa shogun, seeing this looming conflict, hired foreign military assistance from France in 1867 to 1868. 17 French military advisors helped the shogun construct a new navy with 8 steam warships, including the purchase of the ironclad CSS Stonewall. The advisors, one of which being Jules Brunet, the inspiration of Tom Cruise's character Captain Nathan Algren in The Last Samurai, trained an elite corps of 800 shogunate forces called the Denshūtai. The shogun also had the backing of the legendary Shinsengumi, a group of elite samurai who would enforce his rule in Kyoto. Overall, the shogunal forces had the largest amount of arms during the war, consisting of smoothbore muskets, Tanegashima matchlocks, Dreyse needle guns, chassepot rifles, mini rifles. However, for artillery, they relied upon native Japanese cannons that dated back as far as the 16th century. During this time period, certain hands had minor conflicts with Western nations. After shooting some British ships in what is called the Namamugi Incident, Satsuma Domain found itself in a minor battle with Great Britain. After being naval bombarded in Kagoshima, the Satsuma forces quickly apologized and compensated the British. Satsuma was so shocked by the effectiveness of the weapons used against them, they opened up relations with Britain and secretly began to buy arms. This led the British, and even some Americans, to sell Smith & Wesson Army No. 2 handguns, Spencer repeating rifles, Armstrong field guns, mini rifles, and 1 Gatling gun to Satsuma. Satsuma and the anti-shogunate hands had a variety of weapons similar to the shogunal forces, but less of them. However, hands like Satsuma got their hands on artillery weapons such as the Armstrong field guns, which the shogunal forces did not have, and this would prove to be a critical part of the upcoming war. In 1866, both the Tokugawa shogun Ieyasu and Emperor Komei die, and are succeeded by Tokugawa Yoshinobu and Emperor Meiji. Fearing the Tokugawa shogunate becoming too strong, Satsuma, Chōshū, and Tosa domain formed a secret alliance called the Satchō Alliance to counter Yoshinobu. In the face of a civil war, Yoshinobu was pressured by his supporters to resign as shogun and take up a lesser role in the new government, and he did just that in November 9, 1867. However, the Satchō Alliance believed Yoshinobu and the Tokugawa family would still likely dominate the new government, and let us not forget that the former shogun still had his French-trained military force. Even though Yoshinobu was no longer shogun, it was very apparent that he and the Tokugawa family remained firmly in charge of the government policymaking. Saigo Takamori of Satsuma demanded the abolishment of the shogun title and ordered the confiscation of Yoshinobu's lands. Yoshinobu obviously was not keen on this and declared that he would not be bound by the Restoration Proclamation calling for its repeal. Then on January the 24th, he led his forces to march on Kyoto, which was being occupied by Satsuma and Chōshū forces. The shogunate and anti-shogunate forces fell into street fighting and both sides burnt Yoshinobu and Saigo Takamori, that would be the Tokugawa and Satsuma's residences, to the ground. Yoshinobu then fled, sailing to Osaka, with his forces vowing to defeat the rebel Satchō Alliance and rescue the emperor from them. On January the 27th, Yoshinobu sent his force of 15,000 from Osaka to take control of Kyoto, which was being occupied by 5,000 troops of Satsuma and Chōshū. The shogunate vanguard of 2,500 troops make it to Koyeda Bridge in Toba, where they find a Satsuma force of 900 armed men with mini rifles, 4 cannons, and a Gatling gun. The front line of the vanguard was armed with pike and sword, bearing men of the Mima Waragumi and Ainzu, with 2 battalions of riflemen in the rear whose ammunition was still in their gun belts. They assumed they could walk by peacefully, but when they asked for permission to do so, the Satsuma forces began to open fire on them with one of the 4 cannons they had, and this was the first official fire of the Boshin War. The cannon shell exploded, knocking down a shogunate officer named Takigawa Tomotaka. The commander of the force, Sasaki Tadashiburo, ordered the men to charge the entrenched Satsuma forces, and the pike and sword bearers charged at mini-rifle-armed Satsuma men, which were simply gunned down en masse, and the riflemen in the back that I was mentioning before were just beginning to load up their weapons. Then the Gatling gun devastated the shogunal forces, forcing them to retreat, and they lit fires as they ran away. At the same time, at Bongo-bashi Bridge in Fushimi, another shogunal force finds an entrenched Satsuma and Chōshū force. They all hear the cannon fire from Toba, so the entrenched Satsuma and Chōshū begin to fire on the shogunal forces. The shogunal forces this time had the Shinsengumi and Ainzu troops who charge across the bridge to fight and take control, and it becomes a stalemate. The next day, as each side is licking its wounds, an imperial brocade banner emerge on the side of the entrenched Satsuma and Chōshū forces. The imperial brocade banners given by Iwakura on behalf of the Emperor Meiji officially makes the Satsuma and Chōshū forces part of a new imperial army, Kangun. They proclaim that Yoshinobu is a traitor to the emperor and that all shogunate forces are now rebels. The shogunal forces go into a confused panic, some surrender, while others retreat to regroup and figure out what action to take up next. Over the next few days, battles occur in an area such as the Takasugawa encounter, where Shinsengumi, Aizu, and Yukikitai troops fight bitterly with the Satsuma and Chōshū in a guerrilla-style warfare. A battle occurs at Tominomori on January the 29th, but the Imperial Brigade banners again throw the shogunate forces into disarray, and they are forced to retreat. A naval battle at Awa occurs where the shogunal navy defeats the Satsuma navy, yet all of this amounted to the new imperial forces taking more ground each day, consolidating their hold over the mainland of Japan. Yoshinobu, distressed by the imperial approval of his enemies, fled to Edo, hoping to use his influence to gain Western support. Instead, under the guidance of British Minister Harry Parkes, all the foreign nations signed a neutrality agreement to not intervene or provide military supplies to either side until the war was over. Saigo Takamori took this cue to march the imperial forces north and east, winning battles such as the Battle of Koshu Katsunuma, where Kondo Isami, the leader of the Shinsengumi, is captured and beheaded. By May 1868, the imperial forces have surrounded Edo, trapping Yoshinobu. Yoshinobu pleads to France that his government is the legitimate one, but to no avail. The imperial forces are winning the trust of foreign nations by this point. Katsu Kaishu, the shogunal army minister, begins to negotiate the surrender, while some forces continue the fight. Yoshinobu agrees to surrender and goes under house arrest, being stripped of all of his titles, land, and power. In July, the Battle of Ueno occurred where 2,000 Tokugawa retainers harassed imperial forces at Edo. The Imperials used Armstrong field artillery and Schneider guns to devastate the rebels. The shogun's navy, under Inomoto Takayaki, refused to surrender their ships and made an escape to the north with 8 warships and 2,000 personnel in the hopes to create a counterattack with northern daimyo support. Surprisingly, Jules Brunet and a few colleagues formally resigned from the French army and accompanied the rebels north. Aizu, Sendai, Yonezawa, Shonai, and Nagaoka hands form a northern alliance to fight the Imperials. The daimyo of Nagaoka makes a stand at his castle against the Imperials during the Battle of Hokutsu, inflicting heavy casualties by using 2 Gatling guns he purchased from the Prussians. He loses 400 and kills 1,000, but eventually he loses the castle. The Imperials continue their march north and defeat the Shinsengumi at the Battle of Bonari Pass, leaving the path of Aizu unprotected. Aizu is besieged at Tsuruga Castle, and for over a month, until they eventually surrender. This led the Northern Alliance to flee to Hokkaido Island by ship and form the new Republic of Ezo. The Republic of Ezo proclaims Hokkaido Island to be an independent nation based on the American model, with Inomoto Takayuki as its first president. The Republic tries to gain recognition and support from America, France, and Russia, but fails. The Republic prepares for war, organizing its troops in Franco-Japanese command under Otori Keizuki and Jules Brunet. There are 4 brigades, each commanded by French officers: Fortin, Malin, Cazeneuve, and Bouffier, who each have 8 half-brigades commanded by Japanese officers. The remaining Shinsengumi force would be commanded by Hijikata Tojizo. The new Imperial Navy has been created in haste, consisting of 8 warships: Kotetsu, Katsuga, 3 corvettes, and 3 transports commanded by Togo Higashiro. The Imperial Navy leaves Tokyo Bay in March to sail to Hokkaido and anchors in Miyako Bay, where Ezo's navy of 3 warships led by Aira Ikunosuke and the Shinsengumi are awaiting. The Ezo forces place an American flag on their flagship, Kaiten, to confuse the anchored Imperial Navy, and once in reach, the Ezo flag is raised seconds before they ram into the Kotetsu and begin boarding. However, a big problem occurs. The deck of the Kaiten is much higher than the Kotetsu, forcing the Shinsengumi to jump one by one in a trickle. The Kotetsu has a Gatling gun aboard, which rips apart the elite samurai and French advisor, Nicole, who is hit by 2 bullets. Kaiten manages to disengage, damaging 3 Imperial warships, and steams out of the bay en route back to Hokkaido. After the Battle of Miyako Bay, the Imperial fleet, holding a force of 7,000, lands in Ezo. They attack the Ezo holdouts at Kikonai, Futumataguchi, and Matsumayoguchi. The remaining Ezo rebels consolidate at Hakodate, but the Imperials land their forces there and set out an attack on the Ezo navy. Hijikata is killed near Ipponji Kanmon, leading his troops to safety at the Benten Daiba fortress on horseback. This leaves the surviving Shinsengumi under the command of Soma Kazue, who would be their last commander. The remaining Ezo forces occupy Goryakaku fortress with their navy close by. The Imperials surround Goryakaku fortress and begin attacking the Ezo navy. The French advisors to Ezo make a daring escape to a French ship stationed in Hakodate Bay and sail away back to France. The Imperial Navy supports its land forces by destroying onshore fortifications and shelling Ezo ships. The Imperials lose 1 warship, take down 2 Ezo ships, and capture the remaining 3. Inomoto, under pressure from Otori Katsuuke, is convinced to surrender when he tells him to live on and famously says, "Dying is easy, you can do that anytime." Inomoto surrenders on June 27, 1869, accepting Emperor Meiji's rule, dissolving the Ezo Republic, and effectively ending the Boshin War. So after all that, the Meiji Restoration would occur during and after the Boshin War, leading to the abolishment of the samurai class. Many samurai who fought on the winning sides of the Boshin War ended up taking administrative and business positions in the new government, but many others found themselves jobless and fell into poverty. Satsuma, Chōshū, and Tosa, having been the key players in the victory, got the lion's share of government positions. And ironically, the Imperials did not pursue their objective of expelling the barbarians and instead shifted to working with Westerners and trying to renegotiate the unequal treaties. Saigo Takamori and Satsuma domain would soon feel betrayed by the rapid cultural changes and the disregard for the sonnō movement. Disenfranchised samurai would band together in Satsuma to rebel against this new Meiji government. So let's just quickly summarize everything and neatly conclude this. There was a civil war between pro- and anti-shogunate forces looking to take control of the future course for Japan. The shogun lost the war, the shogunate system was dissolved, and Emperor Meiji ushered in a new era known as the Meiji Restoration. The Meiji Restoration rendered the samurai caste obsolete. Many of those who helped win the war saw positions in the new government, but many found themselves disenfranchised, unemployed, and very resentful. All of these cultural changes led figures such as Saigo Takamori to eventually rebel against the empire in what will be known as the Satsuma Rebellion. Now, how does the Boshin War relate to the Pacific War, you might be asking? Much like the Meiji Restoration, it sped up the militarization of Japan. Japan would begin with a small imperial force, but this would soon grow to dominate the political and educational sphere of Japan with an overwhelming form of nationalism behind it. And as we all know, this will eventually cause a supernova in the East during the 1930s when Japan would expand through military force. Dan Carlin reference. Psst. Hey you ever hear me talk about some great Pacific War movie or documentary like Pearl Harbor minute by minute over on Netflix and feel the urge to watch it for yourself? Uh-oh, you live in Japan, and your Netflix doesn't have it? Must suck to be you.
Sucks to be me right now.
Oh wow, Season 4 of Demon Slayer is out. Oh wait, I can't watch it on Canadian Netflix, but it's over on Japan Netflix? Whatever will I do?
Oh, no.
Being blocked from regional content? With private internet access, you too can watch Demon Slayer Season 4 by switching your IP address to Japan.
Yes! Hell yeah!
Why stop with Japan? With private internet access, you can change your IP address to over 84 different countries and every single US state, giving you access to region-restricted content all over the world.
Nice.
Many websites and services like Netflix are only accessible depending on your physical location, but private internet access helps you overcome these restrictions. Think about it, without private internet access, it's like paying for a TV series and missing out on the latest season. Shots fired, Demon Slayer on Canadian Netflix.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Ever fear people are gonna find your Google searches?
Banzai! Banzai! Banzai!
FBI, open up!
Private internet access makes sure that those Google searches remain a buried secret, as private internet access encrypts your internet access and has a no logs policy. Think you're safe with the local coffee shop's free Wi-Fi? No, you are certainly not. Private internet access gives you more privacy features than any other software, and real-time protection from malware and trackers, giving you peace of mind knowing those Google searches remain seen by you, and you alone. Private internet access has a no-log policy that they've defended in court, which means they are not storing any of your browsing data. Hey, are you like me using different devices under one household? Private internet access is available on all platforms and protects an unlimited amount of devices at the same time. I personally use private internet access to unblock movies and TV series from all across the globe, and I sleep easier writing scripts for my YouTube channel and others knowing my data is secure. Look, this is a no-brainer. Sign up with my link in the description of this video to get 83% off, plus 4 months for free, so it ends up being only around $2 per month. Signing up for private internet access is risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and 24/7 customer support is available. So don't forget to click www.piavpn.com/The Pacific War Channel, and a big thanks to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video.
The victors of the Boshin War find themselves in leadership positions within the new Meiji government, particularly Saigo Takamori of Satsuma. Japan is beginning a rapid modernization with the adoption of many Western ideals. The sonnō, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians movement of the Boshin War victors soon is disregarded for fukuko koiei, enrich the country, strengthen the army, leaving many to be disgruntled, and someone would eventually take a stand. So after the Boshin War, many of the victors such as Satsuma and Chōshū officials were given leadership positions in the new Meiji government. Saigo Takamori of Satsuma, alongside Okubo Toshimichi of Satsuma and Kido Takayoshi of Chōshū, became the Isshin no Senketsu, 3 great nobles of the Restoration, who formed a provisional government. Kido and Ukubo would go on the Iwakara mission between 1871 and 1873 to visit Western nations to find models to build the new Meiji state upon, while Saigo Takamori would take care of the provisional government. When the Iwakara mission came back, They notified everyone in Japan that they had to modernize and quickly in order to survive. What was once the Sonnō Joy, revere the emperor and expel the barbarians movement, now became the Fukuko Kyohei, enrich the country, strengthen the army movement for the new Meiji state. Saigo and many other traditionalists begrudgingly went along with this, understanding its necessity, but soon more societal changes would upset them. In order to modernize Japan, one of the first things to be done was to eliminate the Shino Kosho, feudal four divisions of society class system. Shino Kosho was composed of the Shi, warrior caste, No, farming peasants, Ko, craftsmen and artisans, and Sho, merchant class. The Shino Kosho was dissolved, and now everyone was a commoner class who could pursue their own ambitions in life. Alongside this, Hans and their daimyo became prefectures run by governors, who were usually the former daimyos. Now, instead of regional warlords with loyal samurai armies, all governors worked for the central government, reducing the chances of anyone grabbing power. This would also mean, however, the gradual end to the samurai class. Ōmura Masujirō, the former daimyo of Chōshū, and the rival to Saigo of Satsuma, was given a prestigious position in the Meiji government, that of Hiboi Dayu, Vice Minister of War. Ōmura was tasked with modernizing the Japanese military, and this required conscription and the military training of commoners. This meant the end of the hereditary feudal samurai fighting force that had served Japan for over centuries. The samurai class had already been abolished, but now it would lose its special societal privileges, such as wearing top knots, carrying swords, and being allowed to kill commoners who disrespected them. This was all officially made illegal. During the Edo periods, daimyo and samurai were paid stipends, and during the beginning of the Meiji Restoration, 1.9 million samurai were paid in stipends, and this was tremendously expensive, so the government gradually began to abolish the stipends. They did this by taxing stipends and offering to convert them into bonds, and by 1876 the conversion became mandatory, and the former samurai lost around 10 to 75% of their income. Many samurai took the Meiji Restoration by joining the military, becoming businessmen, or joining other institutions. However, some samurai fell into unemployment, being unable to cope with the new age. These disaffected samurai saw their economic situation and loss of special privileges as a betrayal by the state, leaving them behind. On the night of October the 9th, 1869, Ōmura was attacked at an inn in Kyoto by 8 disgruntled ex-samurai. He was stabbed several times, but managed to hide in a bath container while running away from his attackers. Unfortunately, the bathwater was quite dirty, and he ended up dying in Osaka while being treated by a Dutch doctor named A.F. Bodun. Now, Saigo had been a key player in the Meiji Restoration and the Boshin War. He understood the need for modernization and supported a lot of it, but he had major concerns about the growing political corruption and the predicament of those disaffected ex-samurai who could not find a place in the new Meiji era. In 1869, a goodwill mission was sent to Korea to establish new trade and diplomatic relations containing the seal of the new Meiji emperor using the character Ko rather than Teikun, which the Koreans reserved only for the Chinese emperor. You see, this was done to imply that Korea was a vassal to China, and now Japan had implied the same vassal relationship upon them. Korea wished to remain in the Sino-centric world and refused to receive the Japanese envoys, basically insulting the Japanese. By 1873, the Sikan-Ron debate began over Korea not recognizing the Japanese emperor. Saigo Takamori and his supporters insisted Japan confront Korea with a military expedition. Saigo volunteered himself to go to Korea as a special envoy where he would act like an asshole to piss off the Koreans so much that they would try to assassinate him, giving Japan a legitimate reason to attack. Go figure. Saigo was so determined to have the expedition because he saw it as a way to provide income to the unemployed samurai, and perhaps they could occupy Korea much like the daimyo occupied the former Hans. The other Meiji leaders rejected this, however, understanding Japan was in the midst of rapid modernization and could not afford this at this time. This became the last straw for Saigo, who promptly resigned from the government position in protest, and he returned home to Kagoshima in a quasi-retirement. In 1874, Saigo established a private military academy called Shi-Gakko, which soon sprang into 132 branches within Satsuma. Here, disaffected samurai came to learn weapons training, tactics, artillery, and the Chinese classics. The disaffected samurai of these Satsuma academies wore their top knots and carried their swords proudly. Saigo had basically built a paramilitary-like organization because these academies began stockpiling weapons, and by 1876, Satsuma effectively seceded from the Meiji central government. All of this worried the central government enough for them to send 57 spies, such as police officer Nakahara Hizawa, to investigate the academies. Some of the spies were captured and under torture confessed their mission, such as trying to assassinate Saigo Takamori. Following this up, the central government sent a warship to Kagoshima to confiscate the weapons stockpiled there on January 30th, 1877, and this would provoke 50 students of Saigo to attack the Sumoto arsenal and take the weapons. Soon, thousands of students began raiding arsenals all over Satsuma. Saigo was not keen on rebellion, but because of the sudden success of these raids, the students persuaded him to lead a rebellion against the central government. Saigo intended to march on Tokyo to rid the government of corruption and venal politicians. To add some legitimacy to this movement, Saigo wore his military uniform to show his loyalty to the emperor and proclaimed that he would march on Tokyo simply to ask questions of its government. All commoners were forbidden from coming, only the disaffected ex-samurai would march. On the road from Satsuma to Tokyo was Kumamoto Prefecture and the legendary Kumamoto Castle. The Imperials knew if Kumamoto fell, it would mean that all of Kyushu would fall as well, and the rebellion could very well spread all over Japan. The commander of Kumamoto Castle, Major General Tani Tateki, had only 3,800 soldiers and 600 policemen to defend against Saigo's force of over 10,000 ex-samurai. On February the 14th, the Satsuma vanguard crosses over into Kumamoto Prefecture, and on February the 19th, the defenders of Kumamoto Castle opened fire on the Satsuma units, attempting to force their way into the castle. By February the 22nd, the main Satsuma forces arrive, and pincer attack the castle, thinking the conscripted former commoners would be no match for these ex-samurai. 2 full days of fighting occurs, and acting major Nogi Murasuke loses many men in trench warfare outside the castle grounds. Both sides lose hundreds of men to artillery, bullets, swords, bayonets, and particularly Saigo loses a lot of forces to landmines within abandoned imperial trenches. Eventually, the Imperials are forced to retreat within the ancient castle, and Saigo digs in for a long siege. For weeks, Saigo's artillerymen pound the castle walls as the Imperial sharpshooters take them out. Winter is soon on its way. Inside the castle, the situation becomes quite dire. Food is running short. And outside the castle, ex-samurai of Kumamoto begin to flock to Saigo's banner, and he literally doubles his forces to 20,000 strong. In March, an imperial relief force of 90,000 men is led by Irasugawa Tsuruhito and Yamagata Aritomo, who come to break the siege at Kumamoto Castle. Saigo leaves 5,000 men to continue the siege, and then takes 15,000 to go attack the relief force at Tabaruzaka. The Battle of Tabaruzaka begins with skirmishes for several days, spread across 6.5 miles from Tabaruzaka to the Ariake Sea. Heavy rain hampers Saigo's muzzle-loading rifles and supply lines, forcing his men to fight with sword against the imperial bayonets. The melee combat favors the ex-samurai, and over 17 days of battle sees each side losing 4,000 men each. The future Prime Minister of Japan, Turahashi Masatake, loses his right hand in this battle. On March 20th, Saigo's forces are forced to retreat and to regroup at Ueki. The Imperial Navy sends 3 warships carrying 500 policemen and a few companies of soldiers into Kagoshima on March the 8th, seizing the Satsuma governor. Yamagata takes a detachment of 2 infantry brigades and over 1,200 policemen and lands behind Saigo's forces near Yatsushiro Bay. Saigo is now cut off from his prefecture supplies and makes a peace offer to the Imperials, but he is rejected. Saigo abandons the siege at Kumamoto Castle after 52 days, and his forces are effectively on the run and without a plan. They run to Hitoyoshi then, Miyazaki, where they leave many pockets of samurai to ambush the Imperials in guerrilla warfare. By July the 24th, the Imperials push Saigo out of Miyakono-jo onto Nomeoka, where more troops land at Oite, and Saigo tries to pincer attack them. The samurai are able to cut their way out of the encirclement, but by August 17th, their numbers are reduced to 3,000 strong, and many artillery pieces and guns are lost. The surviving rebels are surrounded at Mount Unodake, where Yamagata sends a force 7 times larger to force their surrender. Many of Saigo's trapped forces commit seppuku or surrender at this point. Saigo burns his private papers and uniform, slipping past the Imperials, running for Kagoshima with his remaining 500 men. On September the 1st, they seize Mount Shiroyama, overlooking Kagoshima City. General Yamagata, with 30,000 Marines under the command of Admiral Yawamura Sumiyoshi, surrounds Shiroyama. They build fortifications to encircle Saigo, preventing any escape. Yamagata even ordered the warships nearby to fire upon any positions that were in combat, regardless of friendly fire. Yamagata then orders an artillery barrage lasting the night, and on September the 24th at 4 a.m. he storms up Shiroyama to defeat the samurai. Under heavy fire, Saigo and the samurai charge the Imperial forces, who were not trained for close-quarter combat with swords. The highly skilled samurai of Saigo's forces break the Imperial lines and for a short time cut down the Imperials, but their numbers are too much and they are soon pushed back up Shiroyama. Saigo is shot, receiving a mortal wound to his femoral artery and stomach. He is carried off by Beppu Shinsuke. Saigo commits seppuku and Beppu serves as his kaisha kunen, cutting his head off and hiding it to prevent the enemy from finding it. There is a debate whether Saigo cut open his own stomach, or he was probably not able to do so in a state of shock from his wounds. Regardless of this, any of his loyal warriors would have been assisting him in seppuku, which Beppu did. Beppu, once done, charges downhill to fight and dies in the gunfire. The remaining samurai, without any further ammunition, charge with sword in hand to their deaths by Imperial gunfire. The Satsuma Rebellion ends, as well as the samurai. The Satsuma Rebellion financially hurt the Meiji government, who was forced to go off the gold standard and had to resort to paper currency. The rebellion lasted only 6 months, but superior transport, modern communications, better weapons, and tactics won the day for the Imperials. The rebellion ended the samurai class, but was unable to overcome the paragon of traditional samurai virtues felt by most Japanese. The Meiji government pardoned Saigo Takamori on February the 22nd, 1889, dubbing him the true last samurai. So just to wrap this up and conclude, the Meiji Restoration and the Boshin War gradually led to the disenfranchisement of the former samurai class. Most ex-samurai found jobs in the new Meiji era, but for those who did not, they rebelled. One of these rebellions was the Satsuma Rebellion, which was led by Saigo Takamori, and it ultimately failed. Or did it? Saigo led the Satsuma Rebellion to march on Tokyo to make grievances upon the government. The Meiji Restoration was going in directions he and many others did not agree with. A major grievance was how Fukuko Keioi, enrich the country and strengthen the army, was being done. The Meiji thinkers eventually realized they must go about modernizing using 2 methods. One was to adopt Western ideas, but the other was Fuko, to restore antiquity. The idea was, while they were adopting new Western ideas, they were also looking back at their ancestral past to create a fusion of the two. How does this have anything to do with the Pacific War of 1937 to 1945, you might be asking? While the Bushi had ended, Bushido would live on, now being incorporated into all of Japanese society, and particularly with the military. Bushido would be used as a propaganda tool by the government and military from the Meiji era all the way to 1945. It drove nationalism and eventually militarism. It became arguably corrupted and bastardized, leading to horrible consequences, but it was there nonetheless. I hope you liked this episode, and please, if you've not already done so yet again, hit that like button and subscribe, because my bird has been making noises this entire time I've been filming because she would like more peanuts. This has been the Pacific War Channel, over and out.